Oh my goodness. Well, good evening. Let me ask you a question, or I tell you something. If you're juggling endless reports, emails, research, documents, tonight is for you because we're going to dive into how you can use generative AI tools like ChatGPT to simplify and reduce the amount of time you use to summarize, perform research, and go through a lot of documentation. You see, it's about investing that 1,440 minutes you have, I have, we all have in a day. And how do we do it so that we can focus on deep work, as one author wrote, or those things that are a priority to us and still get through those mundane tasks that we still deal with? If you are a leader, as I call it, a purpose driven leader, this should resonate with you because you're going through documents and having to read a lot of them. And so today we're going to dive into this topic that you're dealing with every day at work and business in your home. It creeps in everywhere. And that topic simply is managing that huge information overload. It is something that I personally struggle with. And so if I'm struggling with it, there's got to be at least one other person out there struggling with it. So if this is something you struggle with, go ahead and put a one in the comments. Put a one in the comments. And while you're doing that, we're going to continue to move forward. So today we're just going to talk about all of those different types of information that comes in and how we can use this technology to get through it faster and more smoothly. And so before we do that, I want to introduce myself for those who don't know me. Welcome to Purposeful Productivity. My YouTube name is at Equip Institute, but I'm actually Florence, and I serve purpose driven leaders by sharing, showing them strategies, tactics, processes to remove productivity friction in their system. And I do that through videos, live streams, and coaching. I am so glad to have you in the building. And I want to say hello to the live tribe who's here, and I see some new folks who are not new to me, but they haven't commented before. So I want to get right to it and say hello to some folks here. So let me do that. Let me do that. Let me do that. So I'm going to start at the top. Hello, Don Drake. Glad to have you in the building. Groomer is here, but will listen on like it. No worries. That means your fur babies are getting a special treat. Awesome. Well, glad that you're here listening. Hey, Roy, glad to have you here. And yes, you're doing your family Uber run on Friday night, but I know you're listening. And at some point, you're going to comment on something that I say. So glad to have you here. David, awesome, awesome. Hello and greetings and salutations to you, sir, on your daily content release in the month of August. You are keeping it up, and I'm so happy for you. And Ravens Talk with Yolanda. Yolanda, your team got a little catch up to do in that first go round, but it'll be okay. And you're teaching me football, and there are some people who are in the lounge with me right now. They're shaking their head because they know I'm still learning the game, but I understand it more just watching you. So I so appreciate what you've sowed into me already. And we have in the building with us Frank Jackson, who is one of our moderators. Thank you, Frank, for being in the building. And everybody, you'll hear me talk about this later, but he's in the lounge. He's over here making faces at me and waving, y'all. But you'll hear more about the lounge a little bit later in the show tonight. And I want to welcome Shamizo. Mizo, so glad to have you in the building. It's because of you that I met Natalie Johnson Lee. So thank you so much. And I'm glad to have you here. And we need to catch up. I hope all is going well with you. All right. That is it for those who are here. So if you are listening and not commenting, welcome to the live tribe. Glad to have you here. And those who are here listening on the replay, listen all the way to the end, watch all the way to the end. There's sure to be something of value for you this evening because that's my aim is to always bring you value. So thank you for watching. And if you have not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And I'm going to get this out of the way now so that you have time to think about it. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat early because I want to do Q&A tonight, a little part of just Q&A. So those questions you have, it doesn't it as long as it's about something relative to the show. It doesn't have to be exactly about tonight's topic. It could be about a topic that we've talked about previously or something completely different, but about productivity, systems, workflows, processes. Go ahead and put a Q colon in front of it and we'll try to get to as many as possible this evening. So, what's the first thing I want to talk about? And I'm going to talk about why. Why? That is a question we all start out anything we do. Why am I doing this? Why is it important? And so the tonight is why would you want to again, why would you want to use generative AI to help you summarize in documents and do research? Well, that's pretty easy for me to answer because it's something that I'm doing and have done myself. And so, you all know if you've ever heard me, I talk about what I do, not what I've read, what I do. And so, the first reason I'm going to give you, and that is to deal with the daily grind of information that comes at you in a way that's efficient. It helps you to avoid hours of unnecessary time reading large reports, 32-page reports, 50-page reports, 75-page reports. Let me say this, it can be in an email. How many of you, if you, I'm going to say put a one if this is you. You've been in an email thread. This really happens at work to me. And 20, 30 replies later, reply all, and you've got to read through all that stuff and figure out what it all means and how it works. If that has happened to you, put a one in the comments. It has happened to me. One person will start and 13 people will reply all. And by the time you get to the end, there are 20 or 30 emails, and your brain is exploding because you can't remember what in the world is all of this content about. That's a good place to use generative AI to summarize all of that stuff and get you to the essence of it. Okay? So if that's happened to you, put a one in, put a one in the comment. So one is to help you digest all of that information in very real ways. Another one is if you're balancing corporate life and personal commitments, it can help you save some of that 1,440 minutes so that you're not spending hours, and I'm going to give you an example how I use this week, hours and hours reading through large documents. It summarizes it, gives you the essence of the content, and then if you need to dig into a particular piece of that content, you can have it show you like, page 15 to just go to page 15, right? So I used it just this week. I had a board meeting, and if you've ever served on any nonprofit of any type and you've served on the board of directors, you know those meeting packets are super thick. They can choke the proverbial horse. And to read through all that stuff and retain everything that's in there will give you a whole headache, not a partial headache, a whole headache. So this week I had a board meeting for an organization that I serve on the board of directors for. And I took the board packet, which is a PDF, and I ran it through generative AI and said, summarize the key points. And some of it were contracts. Tip here. Some of it was contracts. So I ran that through a private version of a generative AI where it's not out in the public and summarized that contract. Notice I was really specific, and we're going to talk a little bit later about being intentional and aware of where you're putting information. So I didn't just throw the contract into ChatGPT where it'll live forever. I did something else. But that's an example, and I was able to get through the summary of those contracts pretty quickly without having to read every line and paragraph. Now, if that's your job, and I know there are some people, it's your job, that's different. My job is not to understand every paragraph and every comma in that contract, okay? You can also summarize complex or lengthy documents. How did I use this? These are real use cases. I'm going to dig into them a little bit more. Running a project, had lots of interviews to go through, and needed to summarize the content of the interviews. It's a project that I'm running with a team. That and it's complex trying to sort through what all of those different interviews are telling us. That's another way. So these are reasons why you would want to use it. Now, I've given you a little bit of how, but it's really why. It's to save you time and make it efficient for you to get through large amounts of data or large documents or complex documents pretty quickly and be able to get, I call it the Cliff Notes versions. Out those of do you remember Cliff Notes in college when you didn't want to read the whole book and you got the Cliff Notes and then you found out you had to go back and read the whole book? Well, this is not that, but it is sort of a Cliff Note version of all of that content. So that's the why. So let's move on. The second thing is I talked about summarization, and I want to dig into this a little bit more and give you some examples. And I'm not going to put them all up on the screen tonight like I did last week, but I just want to talk through some real world examples of things that you can use for summarization in the event that you're not thinking about it this way. Because sometimes using these tools come down to figuring out how do I use it in my world and what I'm dealing with in my everyday life, not somebody else's life, my life. So I've given you a couple. One is if you serve on any nonprofit, you get lots of documents. Summarize those documents using generative AI. 2, 3 weeks ago, I did a video or did a live stream and I explained what some of the top LLMs are. There are also private ways to have some of that information private. So if it's really super sensitive, like I talked about the contracts, you don't want to put it in a public large language model. So there are options. And if you want to know about that, you can come to the lounge. There are options that you can execute to have it in a private large language model so that you don't put that level of detail in a public environment. That's like really truly putting it out for the world to see if you do that. But if you have something that's not as sensitive, maybe it's a book. Maybe it's an ebook. I did this week as well. Working with the team, I have a PDF that talks about work breakdown structures and it's pretty thick. And I just wanted to summarize it for a colleague. I ran it through Copilot and said, "Give me the top 5 points in this book." And that was what I gave the person. I didn't have to go through and highlight and say, "Go read the parts that I highlighted." I just put the PDF in Copilot and took the top 5 points out and gave it to the person. So big documents, meaning lots of pages, 50, 100, 200, 300 pages, get those summaries. Emails we talked about, long ones. Have you ever worked with somebody who wanted to send you War and Peace in an email? They send you a whole book in the body of an email, and you don't want to read all of it. Good use for it. Good use to summarize. Presentations. How many of you have gone into a meeting and they give you a slide deck? I call it a wall of words that drive me crazy, but a slide deck, and reading through all of that deck is going to give you a headache, but you want to get the essence of it. That's another great use case for summarizing the content because you can PDF that slide deck. You can even leave it in whatever it is, Keynote, Google Slides, PowerPoint, and run it through a LLM and get the summary of it. So those are some examples. of how you can use generative AI and large language models to summarize large parts of documents and get them out, get them through your process quickly. Then being able to do that then helps you move on to being able to make decisions versus sorting material, because you can focus on critical information. What it does is it frees up your mental energy, your cognitive load, because when people say they're overwhelmed, frequently, I won't say all the time, I'm not a medical professional, be very clear. But what I've noticed, especially with myself, is because I'm mentally overloaded. I'm not physically overloaded, I'm mentally overloaded. And that's when I start to get that overwhelmed feeling. Using this type of a system or this type of a technology helps me reduce that overwhelm or being mentally overloaded. If this is making sense to you, let me know. I would love to hear more about, and if you've used other processes to summarize information, again, using any of the large language models or any of the generative AI tools that you are aware of, let me know. I'd love to know about some of them. I'm not getting into tool heaven today to tell you about 13 more AI tools that you need to know about. I'm just talking about thinking about how do you actually use it for your benefit. All right. So I'm going to see some folks are chatting here. I'm going to go back and check with some folks. David Hunt is giving moderator salute to Frank Jackson. Thank you. Yes, David Hunt, moderator extraordinaire. I'm learning lots from you in terms of how to be a moderator. And Dawn says 200-page SBDs. What's a SBD, Dawn? I would love to know what that is. But 200 pages of anything is a good tool to way to document to summarize using ChatGPT. All right. So let's go on to the third piece. I'm going to move swiftly tonight, and that is using it for research. Using Gen AI for research. If you have a topic that you want to know more about, using generative AI to help you conduct that research can really elevate the time that you spend. In other words, you use less time collecting the information, and then you use the summarization to help you synthesize it than doing it the old fashioned way. So, and when I say old fashioned way, I mean old fashioned way. You know, when you used to go to the library and you get your resources, and then you switch, you're not going to the library, but you're going to Google or whatever search engine you want to use. The majority of people use Google, and you're grabbing 10, 20, 50, 100 URLs, and then you've got to go through them. Now you can use something like Search Chat GPT and write your prompt, your question in, and start to collect the information. I'm using it right this tonight because I have a project that I have to do for a client. She wanted to know how to do something with the particular program. We met for a few minutes today. I need to do a little bit of research. So instead of me getting out books, which I have, and spending hours pouring through books after the show tonight, I'm going to use Copilot to do the research that I need to get done and pull that information together so that I can give it back to her, give her the answer on Monday when we're back at work. So I use it in that way. The key is know what you want to ask and what you're trying to learn or what you're trying to find. But definitely, if you're trying to learn how to do something, write code, use a program, how look up definitions for things, all of that is research. Be willing to use a large language model to help you get that information together. And if you're a content creator, and I know quite a number of you who are in the comments with us tonight who are in the building, you are. So you're probably already using some form of generative AI, ChatGPT, Claude, Llama, Gemini, any of them to get you a list of ideas, topics, content about your topics, um, titles for videos, titles for articles, descriptions. That's all research. Writing a draft, at least giving you a draft of a description. So those are ways that you can use the research portion or think about it in research. Okay. So one of the things you also have to know, and I talked about this last week, is really knowing how to form your question. So you got to give it some context, and I gave examples last week, but you can do a very simple prompt that says, for example, you are researching a business case or understanding market trends or techniques. You can just simply say, I'm doing this kind of research for this type of market. I'm doing it for women in the age group of 30 to 50 who work who are small business owners of 1 to 10 employees, and I wanna know what are their top 5 challenges that they report. Give me a list of the top 5 challenges they report. That's research. So you gotta give it a little bit of context of what the model is gonna how it's gonna narrow down the search, and then it gives you back some content. Now, we know that the content it gives you back, you don't just take it and run with it. You've got to be a little careful. Verify the information. Verify the information. Hey, Anania, so glad to have you in the building with us. Moderator, salute to you, young lady. You're another phenomenal moderator. So, I've talked about this, but we're going to go into a little bit about the ethical use and some best practices of using generative AI in these ways. One, be very aware of where you're putting information when you use these tools. If it is really sensitive, however you define sensitive for you, don't put your medical records, don't put your driver's license, stuff like that in these tools. In my case, I talked about contracts for an organization. Don't put your contracts in a public LLM, right? So be aware of what you're putting in as source material. However, I will put questions all day and context in all day around personal productivity. Why? I'm not using anybody's name, anybody's personal information, and I'm using very broad descriptions, large swaths of population, men, women, business owners, people who work in house of worship, content creators. I'm using very broad swaths of types of populations that I'm talking about. So be very aware of what you're putting in. If you have access to a private large language model, then you have a little bit more freedom because it's private. It's not going out to the public. Okay. The second one is read everything that it gives you back. Be aware of not use of plagiarism. Use your own words. Be aware of plagiarism. Be aware of any kind of proprietary information. Thank you, Dawn. Be aware of inaccurate information. I will often ask the large language model to give me back what it based its content on. What was the sources of the information? Because I want to go check the sources as well. Really, really true and accurate in research. What's the source? Using this technology does not absolve me or you from being responsible and giving appropriate attribution to content that we're using. I can talk about my own experience. I know what my experience is. It's based on what I've done, what I experience, what I do, what I see, what I didn't do. It's mine. That's not somebody else's. It's just mine. That's one thing. But if I'm using something that could be someone else's, I want to be sure that I'm giving appropriate attribution to it, and I'm not plagiarizing and reusing someone else's work and passing it off as my own. So, citations and having a critical eye, particularly if you're using research, is really, really important. Well, I don't see any questions, but I do um, see some comments in here. So, let's get to them. Dawn says, I've only used for research and to write a letter. Okay. Research is good. Even writing a letter. Last week I talked about ways to use it to write emails and other kinds of content. So absolutely use that. And I want to welcome Miss Inanea. So glad to have you here. And if you have a question, put a Q colon in front of it and go ahead and ask your question. So we've got a little bit of time, and I want to share this with you for coming up this Sunday, everybody. I'm launching something new. You may have questions that you don't want to ask in the public, and you don't want your answers to be given in the public. And I've put together the space. Make it real simple. It's a Zoom meeting. I'm calling it the lounge. We're going to do some fun stuff. Uh, Frank will drop in the chat how to register. You can register. You can come on in. It's going to be at 4:30. There's also a video on the channel that gives you how to register. I've sent an email out to you. If you're on the email list, you got an email from me giving you more information. I would love to have you show up. Bring your questions, but also bring your answers. I taught a class today on meeting management. I know about 40 people were in the class. And I said that in the class, no question is too small, because if you have the question, it's highly likely someone else has the question. So there's not a question that's too small or too simple to ask. So if you've got questions rolling around in your brain, or you've written them in a notepad 13 times, bring them. We're going to get some of those questions answered and help some folks out. So I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for what this means. I love you all here in public, and I love answering questions, and I love interacting with you and sharing my experience. I'm also acutely aware that not every question can be asked and answered publicly. I'm like that. You're like that. We all have those things that are in our lives. It's like, I'm not comfortable asking that in public. So I want to give you a safe place to do so. So I don't have any questions. So I'm not going to give you another chance. I've asked, you don't have any. I appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you being here. Think about how you can use generative AI or a large language model. Pick one. You don't use all of them. Pick one and become familiar with it for these two specific use cases: to summarize a lot of content that you're getting, that you're receiving, and to help you do research. Particularly those two, because it will share. It will help you see insights in information that you have access to that you didn't see on your own. The thumbnail said, "Can it show you insights?" The short answer is yes. But the way you get to the insight is using these two capabilities or these two ways of using it, these use cases of summarization and research. And I see you, Don. Yeah, I love OneNote in the Windows world, and I am going to continue to use it. And I'll probably do some more stuff on OneNote and Evernote on the channel at some point. So, Frank says, "Bring your favorite glass to the lounge." Oh boy, y'all, should I be scared now? Should I be scared? But I am really excited about what you do and what you come back and comment on and how you use AI to help you in these two use cases and what kind of insights you've now looked at your own content on and you've been able to pull out as a result of just using what you already have. All right. So we are going to say, watch this video that's going to be right here, and I will see you in the next video. And hopefully, I'll see you in the lounge on Sunday. Good night, everybody.